Hello and welcome. Today I have the lovely Catherine Edwards from the UK. How are you, Catherine?
I'm really good, actually. And if you're really lucky, you'll see my new cat here as well, who's my,
Oh yeah, I saw a photo on your Instagram
yeah,
actually.
she'll come up and join us at some stage, but I'm letting her explore. Mitzi, so whilst you're talking, I'll see if she wants to. Do you want to say hello? Because everyone wants to see you because you're so beautiful. Look. Oh, now she's just seen big sister Coco outside. Look at her go looking on.
uh,
You're so gorgeous. You go look. I've got her out in the office because when I get a new cat, I know I'm diverging a bit, but they get used to their surroundings, obviously, before I let them use. So I'm taking her in all the different rooms of the house and everything so she can see where her territory is. So because
right,
I've got a new
right.
cat, everything is brilliant for me. But I've had a very reflective week, which I'm sure we'll come on and talk about.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we'll get started. I really wanted to just dig deep into your story initially and see where that takes us, and then we can move from there. But what did you say would have been? I mean, you can kind of start wherever you want, but when did you kind of start figuring out things weren't all right with the world?
It's really interesting. I've thought a lot about that. And I think it's really been in stages with me because um, I was very lucky. I grew up with parents who had a lot of common sense. So,
Yeah.
and I grew up with a lot of animals. So my mother would always look at natural ways of dealing with things and making sure that as humans and as animals, we were all fed well. And because I love science and I love biology, when I went to study biology and when I started being a grown up and being responsible for my own animals, I really realized just how far off track the veterinary industry had got in terms of pharmaceuticals, in terms of jabs, in terms of chemical wormers. And I've always done I've studied a lot of environmental science. So in various jobs I've had, I've been in charge of the environment as well and the pollution of that. So I would say for probably at least 35 years, showing my age here now, I've really been aware of the disparity between the health industry, whether it's human health and pharmaceutical industry or veterinary health, and how far off track that had got from actually trying to help us, that it was basically disease management rather than health education. And then when I had my children, my son's just turned 22. I can't believe that. So when I had my children, and you get put in the system of a new baby, and this is what you must do, and this is the jabs they must have, and this is how you must look after them. I was just like, hang on a minute, this is ridiculous. And that was a long while ago. So it's nothing like what it is for new parents today. So my first awakening was very much on the medical and the health and wellness side of things, and that's been happening for a long while. So when I had my children, I really educated myself a lot on the side effects of vaccines, on what they were telling us nutrition wise. You know, when I had my children, it was very much like, oh, you don't want to be bothered with breastfeeding, you just feed them formula. And no one looked into what the formula was actually had in it and how it was produced. So I was the weird one that did. Having said that, I still worked in a generation where I only had like 3 months off work with my son, and then I had to go back to work or lose my job. So I didn't feed him for as long as I wanted to, but I always really looked into the food side of things and what's in baby food and everything. It's disgusting. So, you know, everyone, all the other mums are sort of saying, oh, this is a really good brand of baby food. And you look in the ingredients, you're thinking, no, it is not. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, very just before I had my daughter, which is when the thing that happened in America in September and shocked the world. And I was with one of my best friends. We were on a course, and so they stopped the course and pulled us all in front of the television, and we were watching it all unfold. And I can remember seeing that and thinking, there's just no way. There's no way a plane can do that. But I didn't really go into it in too much more detail because I see my cat in the background, she's exploring everywhere. Um, I knew there was something wrong there. I knew it didn't make sense. I knew we weren't being told the truth, but I'd never followed politics or the mainstream news much because I never believed what they were telling us. So I was a little bit of a laughing stock in my peer group because they perceived my lack of interest in politics and world events as ignorance. And I would sort of say, well, it's not what I believe. So, history, I always thought our history was made up. So I could get 100% in a history exam because I've got very good memory. But I used to say to my history teacher, well, you're teaching us this about the First and Second World War. What are they teaching the children in Germany? I bet it's not the same. And so how can you say this is the truth we're learning? So it's been a very gradual state for me. And then when this whole ridiculous V thing hit 2 years ago, it was a very difficult time for our family because my father was terminally ill by that stage, and I was taking him along to a lot of his hospital appointments and everything. And of course, suddenly you had to be masked up, you couldn't go and visit them. And I was just like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I could see through that straight away. I didn't know about Event 201, but I very quickly learnt about it. And then as soon as I started seeing about that, I was just like, oh my God. So it's been a gradual journey with a very steep, for 30 years, sort of like this, but only in certain areas that really interested me, like the environment, like the health, like the pollution, like what they're putting in our water. And then the last 2 years have been like this, where suddenly I've realized how all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. So I was aware of the Rockefellers and what they'd done to the medical system, but I wasn't aware of how that linked into the banking, the mainstream education, the politics, the royals, the global agenda, etc. And I was certainly, for probably when they first started off the whole environmental agenda, I fell for that hook, line and sinker. Until I suddenly started thinking sitting there and thinking, but this doesn't make sense. You're talking about electric cars, but people who are plugging their car into their house to charge up their battery are using the fossil fuels to charge their house, which is making the electricity. Like, hello.
It's the same thing.
But I didn't have anyone speak to about it because everyone thought I was just ignorant. So the other people that I was speaking to in my immediate peer group just thought I was ignorant. And so I was a little bit of a laughing stock until their children, their animals started being jab damaged, or until a lot of their children started having really chronic health conditions. And then when all else had failed, they'd start coming to me and realizing that actually I didn't know what I was talking about in those areas.
What's your thoughts on, because I just watched a short video this morning, which is really interesting. It was by Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper, he was assassinated.
Not really, don't know a lot about him.
So he was, I think he was ex-CIA, or he was an ex-airline Air Force pilot or something. Don't quote me on that, but he's had something to do with that.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book called Behold the Pale Horse, and I started reading some of it, and it was written, I think, in the late 80s or early 90s. Anyway, he predicted the September event that you just mentioned, and he also had a radio show, and then he was assassinated. But he said something today in this video. Well, not today, but he had this video, and I wanted to know what your thoughts about the microchipping of the animals is, because he said in the video that, do you think they really care about your pets? That's not the reason why they do it. Why would they set up a satellite to track your pet? The reason is they want to see how effective it is, to see if it's going to work on humans.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that, because with the microchipping, most of us until recently, we haven't got, they can scan them, but you have to scan them in situ. They're not tracking them sort of from satellites and things. So I've never seen any data to show they've been doing that. However, I've been working in animal health, natural animal health, for 20 years, and I've been beating against the drum about how you treat your animals as a direct relationship of where society is. So people think it's normal to pump all these toxic chemicals on the back of their neck for flea and wormers or annual jabs and things like this, and no one questions it until it comes to doing it to themselves. And now people are questioning what they're doing with pets. So I think they've used I think it's been just another form of the MK Ultra brainwashing in terms of treating people that this is normal. So I do think it's now very nefarious. So as an animal owner, and I've got 5 cats, I don't put collars on my cats because I know several people whose cats, even with the safety ones, have hung themselves on the collar because if they're climbing
Yeah,
thick bushes and things like that. So I used to put
yeah.
collars on my cats. And then one of my friends had the most horrific thing happen to their cat. And I was like, oh my God, I'm just not going to risk it. So for as a cat owner, I was thinking, well, at least if one gets lost and found, they'll be able to track it. Now I think very, very differently because I think they have been testing out all this technology. They've been brainwashing people into thinking it's normal to feed bran lumps of kibble to a dog or a cat because they're trying to get people away from any healthcare. The life expectancy of domestic dog has gone down
Mm.
to half of what it was 100 years ago. So they've got us
Wow.
used to not questioning pumping poisonous chemicals, vaccinations, ridiculous food, even things like spaying and neutering. And I can go on for this for ages. Take out, spay them, neuter them. You wouldn't. I'd completely get. I'm not talking about rescue animals, okay? I'm not talking about rescue animals, but they're getting us to normalize things that are not normal or healthy or encouraging good life. So I
But it's
think
what they're doing to us. It's like what
exactly
they're doing to the animals is exactly what they want to do to us and have been in
exactly
some
what they
countries.
want to do to us. And I can see it clear as day. And I've been saying this for so long. And now, for me, this is why everyone says it's been such a difficult 2 years. For me, it hasn't. Yes, I have lost a lot of friends and family, but family have always thought I was weird and mad. So really,
Mm.
that's no different. They're just a bit more vocal about it now because they've got more concrete things that they can say I'm wrong about.
Yeah.
But I've get the people I've gained and the connections that I've gained have far outweighed anything I've lost, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And it's even like if you take factory farming animals. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate about whether people choose to eat meat or not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about normalizing, loading a whole load of sentient beings, and all the studies show that they feel the same emotions, same pain thresholds as we do, into a lorry and taking them along to a slaughterhouse, however good their life has been. Now, I won't mention the word, but anyone watching this will know about the chemical that's produced when an animal of any species is in fear
Mm.
and how that has been used and collected by the nefarious people over, and we have only, and most people have only just recently found out about that. And yet we've been consuming that same chemical in the animals that have been slaughtered in a slaughterhouse for ages. So do you
Right.
see how they're getting your bodies and your mindset and getting people to switch off from literally abhorrent behavior? If you can do that to another species, and they've shown that with humans, look at what they've shown now with humans, how few people, when push comes to the shove, will actually stand up and defend those who are being attacked, who are being brutalized, who are being discriminated against. It's very easy to sign a petition on live, but are you actually going to stand up in your community and put yourself out there and say, no, I won't see this happen?
Yeah, unfortunately, some people are all too happy to do it, in fact, and it's become a bit of a power, not a little bit, a big power trip for a lot of people, especially, well, not especially, but of people of any age, really. It's like people who are in any kind of position of power, or even not even just like a checkout person at a supermarket or something,
Yeah,
who won't let somebody buy food because they weren't wearing a thing,
yeah,
you know, like it's madness. And there's no even rule here
yeah.
in our state anyway that says they can do that, but yet they're taking it upon themselves, or they think that they can. And yeah, it's insane.
I mean, doctors, we've had a horrific situation here for things where, I mean, my own father, all his treatment was stopped overnight. It was absolutely barbaric. And, to think
Mm,
you could be a medical professional and do that and treat one of your patients like that is, to me, completely inexcusable. And we've learned a lot about the so-called, they're labeled as elites, but we all know they're not, they're scum. But about what they do, and we can't get into that mind frame because we're not psychopaths and we haven't been raised in that cult. And yet to see normal behavior, normal
mm,
people in everyday life, what they've been prepared to do here, and I'm still seeing it now. I'm seeing examples all the time of how how actually people are very happy to spout over a dinner party or on their Facebook account, I stand for Ukraine, but what they're actually prepared to do in real life to stand up for those less fortunate themselves, or to stand up for what they profess their morals to do, doesn't match. And it's really disappointed me. Actually, I've been pretty
No.
shocked.
Yeah, me too. Me too. You mentioned the word cult, and I saw a thing recently because the word culture is has that word in it, obviously,
Yeah.
and the word ure is also a word as well. And have you seen that? Do you know what the definition of that word is? Because it's very interesting when you when you put the two take the two words. Uh, I'll just pull it up.
Yeah, please do.
It says forming nouns denoting an action, process, or result. So you're actioning towards a cult, really.
Yeah.
And a cult is obviously a group where they uh they they tell you what they think, really.
Yeah, and you have to comply with that at all costs, or you're
Mm.
ostracized, or worse.
Yeah. So there's so much in our language that really, when you look at it on a deeper level, it's right in your face, but we just don't know. We just don't kind of think about it. We don't know all the meanings for all the words, which is okay, you know.
My friend Lucy Davis, who's on Instagram, and I've done a few interviews with, so you can find her details below my interviews on there. She's really, we've talked about spelling for a long while, and it's always hysterical because I've always been very academic, but I've never been able to spell. And it's really funny. But we
Yeah.
talk about spelling, and you learn your spelling. But again, the whole word spelling, television, it's so in your face, isn't it? And once you start seeing it, you see it everywhere. And I think anyone who's got any
Mm.
sort of spiritual development is very
Broadcasting.
well, yeah, broadcasting. Anyone who's been doing any sort of self-development, spiritual development, whatever you want to call it, we're all very aware now that we're all energy, and words have energy, and thoughts have energy, and you like attracts like, etc. But when you start looking at our language, you're just like, my goodness. Now, what's always
Yeah.
fascinating to me is, obviously I'm English, and so I speak English, and most people know that the British are absolutely useless, most of us, at learning foreign languages, because we're so arrogant, because most people speak English, and so we don't really have to learn another one. So I'm always
Mm.
fascinated to see how these words and these spellings, like culture, whether it's got the same meaning and connotation in the other languages as well.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And also gematria as well. So obviously a lot of people have been into gematria and everything, and so we use the English language normally for that. And again, it's fascinating to see, does it come out with the same result in other languages? Because I'm so hopeless at languages, I haven't looked into that. But everything you do now, for me, David, it's just been, everyone says it's been the most difficult 2 years of your life. It hasn't for me at all. It's probably been almost some of the best 2 years of my life, because all these things that something within me knew none of this made sense, now it's all starting to make sense. And you're thinking, well, I wasn't mad after all. I knew there was something wrong. I didn't know what was wrong. I mean, and quite frankly, one of the conversations I'm starting to have with people now is, how much is it healthy for us to know? How far down the rabbit hole do we want to go? Because if we're aware that our words and thoughts have energy, you bring into your life what you focus on. And so how much do you want to focus on these things? It's a balance, isn't it? But yeah, the spelling and the words, oh my goodness, it's like when people really start, like my friend Lucy says, don't say good morning.
Yeah.
This morning, your morning, what does the
Say
word?
rising instead. Good rising or something.
Yeah, so she says good rising, sort of, and you're just like, it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. Good grief, how far have these cults? And you sent me through the video, we didn't start the fire. Brilliant video. Will you be putting that on your Telegram?
Yeah, I could do. I think I downloaded it actually. Yeah. So.
And I'll share it on mine, from yours, because it's just like, you look at this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, it's so deep seated. throughout culture. And I bring it back to, again, it's like, how manipulative are some humans? Because to even be conceiving these ideas in the first place shows how twisted. You don't see this in any of the other of the animal kingdom. You don't see this
Mm, mm,
premeditated evilness. Yes, of course, nature's very cruel. If the pack of lions are hungry, they'll go out and hunt and kill another animal. And I'm sure the other animal that's being killed isn't very grateful for that. But you don't see this premeditated control structures that humans are completely obsessed with.
yeah, yeah. Just to cap off the spelling, there was a video I watched, and they said, like the weekend, the
Yes.
end of the week is the weekend, and it's weekend. It's like you're weekend
Yeah.
at the end of the week, and you go and do whatever the hell it is you do, and generally, generally lose yourself on the weekends. What most people do. I did
Yeah.
that for a very long time, um, and just get further and further away from who you really are. It's really interesting how it's all been set up, but yeah, there's just too much to think about. I was thinking about numbers today because I've been watching a few things with Tom Numbers, and a lot of his stuff goes way over my head because he's so into it, and I'm like, okay, well, what does it really matter? Like if one word is the same number as another word,
Yeah.
and I don't know the answer to that question, but he obviously does, and it's almost like everything is so divine and well calculated and well thought out, but from a universal perspective as well. With like Tesla and the 369, you know, or with the numbers, uh, and the vibrations of he said like
Yeah.
the vibrations of the numbers 369, like they're like the keys to the universe pretty much.
And it really occurred to me when you were saying about that is, some people say, well, don't be silly, the English language has been around forever. But when you look at how many words there are available to us and how small a percentage of the whole English language most people use in a daily life, it's a
Yeah,
tiny percentage that most of us use. And we
correct.
know it's very easy to start a trend in terms of what people say. So, for example, mine have only just out of being teenagers, my children. And when we grew up, wicked meant evil, meant bad. And now they've changed it so that wicked means cool and good or whatever.
Yeah.
So what I think they've done is they've taken certain words and made them mainstream and brought them into our consciousness. Because you say you don't have to say good morning, you can say hello, you can say grand risings. There's a million different ways you can greet someone if you see them at the start of the day, but they've
Yeah.
made that our norm. So it's not that, I'm sure there's lots of inert positive words that we could use, like grand risings, but they've
Mm.
made the norm to be the ones with the nefarious things, because we're so many different ways we could express ourselves, but most of us use a very narrow range of vocabulary, and that's deliberate because that's what they've brought into our consciousness and made the norm.
And a lot of people even just cut the good out and just say morning instead,
Yeah,
It's
exactly, which
like,
is even worse. And you look at it now, and
yeah,
because I started off and thinking, wow, why are they saying grandma sins? And then I was like, oh, a bit like the awakening I had when I started realizing, because I thought for ages that the dairy industry wasn't cool. And every time I mention this,
right.
loads of it. And then I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, I've had children. I know how breast milk's produced. How the hell do you think you get a cow to produce breast milk? They have a
Mm.
baby and then you take the
Yeah.
baby away from it. And it's these things where you just think, that's why my whole theme now is raising consciousness through curiosity, because just question. And we are living in this world, and I love the world. Everyone's sort of saying also this is the most difficult time we've lived through in history, and everyone's experience is difficult. But I'm thinking, would I rather have lived through the last 2 years of lockdown, and I have been through, I have lost friends, I have lost family members, or would I have rather be sending my son off at 19 years old to fight in the trenches of the First World War? Well, I'd take this
Mm.
experience any day.
Yeah, for sure. It's when this whole thing started, I was like, I'm, kind of ready for battle, so to speak, if you know what I mean. It's like
Yes.
I had that mindset. I was like, whatever it takes, even if it means hand-to-hand combat,
Yeah,
like uh, I'll do that,
me
if
too.
it comes down to it. Um, luckily it hasn't, touch wood, hopefully it won't. But what that mentality has given me is the ability to do the simple things, which is actually not that simple at all. Which just go to the shop without a muzzle on,
Yeah,
or just not succumb to the pressure, the monumental pressure from the government and the media and all that stuff to go and get the thing. Like yesterday, I caught up with a friend who I hadn't seen in a while. The last time I saw him was at the end of 2020 when the jabs hadn't been rolled out or anything yet, and and we were driving back from, well, we were driving to a shop that we were going to go to, and I said, hey, because he's a doctor, and I was like, oh, do you reckon you could write a mask exemption? And he goes, no, I'm not. It's not really my field. I can't really do that. And he was talking about it. He's been kind of traveling a little bit with work, and and then we were talking about the muzzles and stuff, and he goes, I said, oh, I've never worn one before. I never wear them. And he goes, well, what are you going to do today when we go to the shop? And I said, I'm just going to walk in. and then, and, uh, and he said, oh, well, if they stop you, I can give you, because he's a doctor, he has plenty of spare ones. And I just walked in, nothing happened. No one said anything. And, and then on the way back, he said, oh, do you want to go see Batman, the new Batman film? I was like, yeah, yeah, I'd love to see that film. And then I thought about it. I was like, actually, I probably can't. And he goes, why not? And he goes, oh, because of the thing. And I said, yeah. And this is not somebody that I haven't spoken to him at length about any of the stuff, really. The last time I saw him, he goes, you've got a bit of an alternative view. What do you think about what's going on? And I just told him what I thought. And but we hadn't spoken about the jab or anything because it hadn't even rolled out yet. But he obviously knew, because I wasn't wearing a thing, and probably
yeah.
because of the last conversation, that I wasn't going to get it anyway. And then he goes, why don't you just get it? It's easy. And I was like, no, I don't want to get it. Like, why would I get that just to go to watch a movie? Like, that's the kind of a silly idea, but I didn't say that. But anyway, it's just funny how, back to my point, it's being convicted in your actions and your thoughts, and following it up with a congruence. Because if you don't, you can say one thing and do another. I could have easily just said, oh, okay, I'll just wear the thing, even if, and 9 times out of 10, no one says anything anyway. A lot
No,
of people are really worried about it. They're worried about getting yelled at or ostracized or whatever. No one really says anything.
I agree. And it's really, really surprised me because, up until this, I haven't really had any challenging situations like that because I haven't needed to sort of go against any mandates or laws or anything, because there hasn't been anything that's directly affected me. And with this, because there was absolutely no doubt in my mind, it was an absolute no. I've had so little challenges. Now, I think I'm quite lucky where I live. I know it's very different in different places and everything, but I've used the example loads of times. I mean, my husband doesn't believe any of this of what we believe, but he's absolutely adamant about this. And luckily, I've made him see the light about this. But because he doesn't
Yeah,
focus on it, doesn't give it any attention at all, he's never had a single person ask him about either. Because, going back to, energy flows where attention goes. And I think this has been it's still an ongoing work in progress for me in terms of how do you educate yourself enough so that you can make the best decisions for yourself and your family when your family are at an age where you're making decisions for them, whether they're four-legged family or two-legged for children, or without putting too much attention on the negative and therefore attracting that into your life. And I think you and I
mm,
have spoken on numerous occasions, people like, think what you like about him, people like Tony Robbins, but or anyone who's trying to overcome an addiction. If you want to change something in your life, you have to get to the stage where it's an unmovable boundary for you. It's an absolute no, because if you're a woolly no, people will pick that up energetically. Look at who bullies go for. They go for people with lack of self-confidence and things. It's you've got to, because we're all giving off pheromones, whether we know about it or not. We're giving so much information out to every part, every human, animal, plant around us all the time. We're giving it off by our body language, by our words,
right. Yeah,
by our pheromones that we're screeching from our bodies. So, and we're not necessarily consciously aware of that, but we are. And when you've got an absolute no, I am not complying, it's so much easier. Every decision gets easy, doesn't it? When you know what your core values are and you're going to stick to them no matter what.
Yeah, and it's just being comfortable with that decision, no matter the consequences,
Mm.
right? So it's like, okay, well, if I can't go to I love live music, you know, I can't go to any concerts, I'm not allowed. Granted, there aren't really many on right now, but even if there were, I wouldn't be allowed. So that's just what I have to live with for the time being. You know, I just can't go. You know, and what I think it is it's different for everybody, but you kind of need to have enough experiences in your life where you gave a lot of things up for a long period of time. I've had
Yeah.
a good portion of my life where I just gave up a lot of things, not intentionally. Uh, I just didn't have the resources to do things, or I was, you know, whatever the reason was, I couldn't do certain things that I really would like to have done. And it got me used to giving up some of the finer things in life, like going out for dinner or going to a concert or traveling for a long time. You know, I couldn't do any of that because I just didn't have the money. And and because of that reason, it put me in a really good position for now to kind of just say, well, I haven't done that for a long time. It's not going to change anything, you know?
Yeah.
And when it comes back, then great. But until then, I'm not going to have to really do anything about it, you know?
I think you've hit on a couple of really, really important points there. One is age and life experience. So obviously I'm a lot older than you. Now I'm lucky enough that I travel around the world. I've been to loads of countries. I've done all this. And when I was 18 or 20 years old, I didn't think to question the things in the same way I did now. You know, if I was told to go to Zambia that I needed certain vaccinations, I just did it and I didn't really question it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
at different stages in your life, one, when you're younger, you feel you're invincible. And also, two, I just wasn't in a consciousness that I would have thought to even question it. So I think it's a really good point you brought out. You know, was now I live in a beautiful place. I'm surrounded by animals. I've created a work life where I can do from anywhere, more or less. But that's taken me a long while and a lot of different steps and learning curves to go through to get to that stage. But obviously, other people aren't in that situation. And you know, I've seen both my children have everything at school cancelled, everything at college cancelled, everything at university, and that's been so much tougher for them. So their experience is
Mm.
way, way harder than mine has at my stage of life. And but when I look back at what I've done, my life that I'm living now has been 30 years in creation. It's been
Yeah.
steps all the way along to aim to a common goal, and doing, you know, having a lot of difficult times to get to things that's really important to me. But I've had the time to do that, was younger people haven't. So they've had a completely different experience with this. And I wouldn't expect necessarily, you know, younger people to question things in the same way. You know, I've gone through being a parent and seeing loads of people I know personally have jab damaged children. So of course
Mm.
I'm going to question things a lot more than someone who hasn't had that experience in their life. Unfortunately, sometimes you learn the hard way.
Yeah. Well, you said it yourself just at the start of your bit there, where you said it's consciousness, and that's really the what I think is kind of like the answer to a lot of, well, it's the answer to a lot of things, but in this instance, the consciousness allows you to see the bigger picture. It allows you to, because there are people that are older than me
Yeah.
who still want to get it just so they can go to the restaurant. It's got nothing to do with age, you know.
Yes.
So, and there are probably people that are younger and like in their 20s who go, no, it's just not happening, and I don't mind, you know, just not doing that. I just won't go traveling until it blows over or whatever. So yes, it has something to do with age, but also doesn't have something to do with age in many ways too.
Yeah, you
It's
are
really
right.
life experience. It's life experience, but it's also it's a different kind of life experience because you can go from up to 70, 80, whatever, and not have the same and live through a lot. You know, you can do a heap of things, or you could do not very much at all. But even if you do a heap of things, you may still be a similar consciousness level that you were the entire time, you
Yeah.
know?
And I think that's where it comes into conscious choices. I think for me, it's been so apparent that it's those little decisions that you make on a daily basis that make the difference. So take myself with my animals. Everyone knows I'm always talking about my animals, but I am really consistent in their care. Take the herbs I give to the animals. I don't just give them when I remember, I give them every day, because if it's important to me, it's important to me. And if I have to get up an hour earlier to do it, I will, because it's important. I don't pick and choose when certain things are important to me. Does that make sense? There's certain core
Yeah, for
values
sure.
that I live by, and they are non-negotiable. And there's always a way. Again, I'm quite lucky. I've had parents that have always found a way around a problem. One of my things my dad used to say all the time is, life's not fair, get over it, find a way around it. And so I've grown up with
Yeah,
that consciousness that I haven't been allowed to sit there and wallow and moaning about things. You find a way around it. And in my experience, 9.9 times out of 10, there is a way around it. There are some situations where there aren't. And therefore it goes back
right.
to, concentrate. Can you change it? Yes, change it. Can you change it? No, accept it. And it's
Mm,
really that simple, really.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's so multi-layered. Everything is so multi-layered, and everything is there's no easy answer or easy, anything really, to live your, easy way to live your life or whatever. Um, and everybody has their own experience,
Mm.
but it definitely pays to work on yourself and move yourself through the different levels of consciousness, because you'll find that when you do that, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, that life just seems to flow so much better, and it's not really an uphill battle. You're not pushing crap uphill. You feel lighter. You're more happy. And everything kind of just seems to go your way.
Yeah. It's
Mm,
fascinating, isn't it? And we are all born different for a reason. I use the analogy the whole time. If you've got a football team, you can't all be strikers. You need a goalkeeper, you need a
exactly.
defense, you need
Yeah, for sure.
midfield, you need wingers. And the strikers who score the goals might get all the attention, but they can't score the goals without everyone else on the pitch doing their job really well. And
Yeah.
I think, you see so many examples in life where people have been through horrific experiences, and animals, and yet they've managed to turn their lives around and really do something so constructive with themselves and live happy, fulfilled lives. Cathy O'Brien is a classic example. I've heard a lot of her interviews. And, when you
Mm,
hear what obstacles some people, what we're capable of overcoming, it's absolutely phenomenal. And I think it's amazing. Even on a different length, you hear someone like Wim Hof and you think, I look at what he achieves and I just thinking, my goodness,
yeah.
I do not push myself physically at all. And I look at what some of these people do, but it doesn't matter what your passion is and what your purpose is, however big or small, the more you know yourself, and you need to work on yourself to do that, the more, as you say, everything else flows and comes into place. Because this comparison that we've got, that we don't all want to be leaders, we can't all be warriors. You also need the people, that are going to look after and nurture, and you need the mothers, and everyone's got a role, and we're taught that some are more important than others. But the older I get, the more they're so not. I've completely changed my time. People that used to impress me now in the past don't impress me at all now. But my neighbor, who was so amazing, helping everyone out in the storms, and and they're the people I really admire now, because he's consistently been a good citizen all his life.
Mm, yeah. There's a lot to be said for everyday heroes.
Yes.
Where we're taught to admire or idolize certain people in society. Um, and if anything, what I've seen so far with the flooding over east is that it's the people that are making the biggest difference. It's the people in the area and the people around the country that are donating food or money or resources or whatever it is, or you know, all the people on the ground that are orchestrating their own cleanup, because the government's really doing F all, you know,
Exactly.
uh, and to the point where I don't know if you've seen these videos, but the ADF, the Defense Force here, have been filming themselves do a minute task, and there's like 8 or 10 of them unloading a trailer with these tiny little things in a little production line, and they filmed it to go and put it somewhere. Like it's just making a mockery of everything that, and it's insane some of the things I've seen over there. But it's the people that make the biggest difference, and the communities really come together. And the interesting thing about that is that this is a real crisis, not like the bullshit one we've had for the last 2 years. So in a real crisis, people come together, regardless of status, regardless of anything, they'll come together. And but in a manufactured crisis, you're pitted against each other because it's because that's division. But in a real crisis, nothing brings a community together than like that.
I think it's been amazing. I mean, Medina has been sending me certain videos, so I'm just looking to make sure that person doesn't open the door and let the cat out. Medina's been sending me some of the videos, and it's really weird because when after university in 1991, when I spent the year traveling around Australia with some friends, we were caught in really, really bad floods, and I've never seen anything like it. So I was completely stranded on Magnetic Island for weeks and weeks. And of course, in those days, there were no mobile phones, so I couldn't get hold of anyone back home or anything. And the force of nature is just unbelievable. And again, what is so amazing is to see what the ordinary people do in those situations. And it really does restore yourself, your faith in human nature. And an old saying, actions speak louder than words. And I think it's so, so true. I think we're in a very lucky position anyone who's watching this video, everyone's situation is different, but if you've got a computer or a phone, an internet and a house and things like that, they call them sort of first world problems. And I do sort of agree with that in terms of when the shit really hits the fan, like what you're going through in Australia and a lot of areas now. I mean, that is absolutely horrific what people are having to do and what's they're faced with. But when they show what's really capable and they do sort of all pull together, it's so rewarding. And I suppose I'm guilty of this so much because we've got so much time to overthink things with modern day life. Whereas when I was out working in Zambia, for example, and other areas that I've been to, not everyone's got that luxury. They don't have the time to sit there and overthink things because they're busy surviving and gathering food and fresh water and trying to get a shelter over their head. And I think Gala Lucy that I was speaking to yesterday, she talked about, and there was a lot of people that didn't like what she said, and that's fine. Everyone will view it through their own lens, and it doesn't mean it's true anyway. But we talk about how excess, and we've always thought sort of excess and living in times of plenty is a good thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing because it can make you lazy. It can make you things. Anyone who's got horses know that if they have too much grass, it triggers all sorts of health issues. So getting out of this mindset that bountiful is always good, it isn't always good. We're meant to have the cycles of feast and famine to keep us physically, emotionally and spiritually healthy.
Right. But also, I think that we could have maybe we don't have to have such extremes. We could have this, but it also comes down to personal responsibility, doesn't it? Because in any situation, whether it's feast or famine, there are going to be people that are lazy. There are going to be people that aren't. So it really just comes down to the person itself, the individual, and what they want to, how they want to grow, or not grow for that matter. Because the people that have grown the most over the last 2 years, there are people that started this journey 2 years ago and the same today than they were 2 years ago. There are other people who, or even worse perhaps, because if you don't grow, you're dying if you're not growing, right? So the people, I don't think anybody has stayed the same. I think you've gone one of two ways. You've either gone a lot better and you've gone to new heights, or you've gone worse because mentally, you know what I mean? Like from a mental health perspective, it's very it would have been very challenging for a lot of people, you know.
Absolutely. And I think, when you've got responsibilities, for me, it's actually easier, because when you've got other beings, whether of whatever species, doesn't matter whether it's your vegetable garden, your animals, your family, your community, it's so rewarding. You feel so on purpose if you're doing something, to help. And I think if you haven't got, if no one needs you, if no one, you don't feel you're in a position to contribute, it's a very, very different place to be. And again, I think a lot depends on where people live. If you're living out in the countryside where I am, which naturally you've got more of a community because there's not many of you. So, when the storms hit, you have to rely on each other and help each other, etc., which we all do. Whereas if you're living in a big city and you haven't got that sort of, necessarily, I'm sure there's some big cities that have got lovely communities, but a lot of my friends, for example, who've been living in London have had a far, far more difficult experience because they're in flats, they don't really know their neighbours, there's no sort of community spirit, and it's been really hard for them. It's been hard. Where do you start? Where do you start to contribute? How do you know who the vulnerable people are in your areas that need your help and that you can go and help for? It's just much more difficult. So everyone's situation is very, very unique. And also everyone's journey is very unique. I had someone say to me, yeah, I'm tired now. I've been there, I've done that. I'm very happy now to sort of, my time's ready to go, basically. And you've got to respect that as well, that people have been through an awful lot in their lives that other people have no idea about.
Yeah. I think it's ironic, but you can also see why it's been set up like this. It's ironic that people that live in a flat situation or an apartment building where they're literally living a lot closer to everyone in their area, yet they're more divided or
Yeah.
they're more strangers. Whereas in your situation, I don't imagine you're living like house by house by house by house, yet you're much closer.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting doesn't, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't really make any sense, does it? I mean, you know what I mean? Like at first
And
glance.
also I think it's deliberate. I think
Yeah, yeah.
it's deliberate, and it's the decisions you make along your journey that set you up to where you are today. And I think a lot of people, that there's a lot of decisions that in hindsight people look back on and think, actually this is where I'm at today because I didn't think it through sort of properly. And I think what this last 2 years has really made people think about, often for the first time, is what do I want for my life? What do I want the rest of my life to look like? So say in the UK, we've had a huge amount of people move out of the big cities into the countryside. Now that's caused different problems because only ones with a lot of money have been able to afford to do that because the living out of the city is now so in demand. The house prices have gone up like that. But there's always a way. I know someone else who lives on her own with her rescue dog, and she has said, no, I'm going to, and she's got herself a little shepherd's hut and she's living really happily and amazingly out of that. So, there is a way around it if you're determined enough. Normally, I know someone else that's got a farmland around us has got yurts set up and people are actually living in there now. They've moved out of the city and they're living in the yurt. So, if you're creative, there's normally a way. If it's important enough to you, you can normally find a way to make some sort of positive change.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. It is very true. We're coming up to the hour, Kath.
Gosh, are we already? Good grief.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to, anything else you would like to say that you think maybe people would enjoy or get a huge amount of value out of?
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head in a lot of the discussions we've had, David, is it's all about working on yourself. And it's not me in a selfish way of things, but sort of when you're looking at how you're reacting to certain situations, what are you contributing to other people, to the community, to the land, whatever it is. And when you put your focus on what can I do, so for example, another example from the interview with Gala Lucy, she was saying that, people will be growing their own food. And then I got inundated with people saying, but I live in a city and I haven't got my own garden, so I can't. Well, you can start today to grow a few herbs on your windowsill.
Mm.
Or you can say, have I got any friends that have got big gardens, and could I go and have the conversation with them and say, could I have a patch of your garden to work as my garden? Look for what you can do, not for what the obstacles. And yes, it is human nature to say I can't because. So once you've identified what the blockage is, get creative, brainstorm with some friends and think, okay, how do we get around this blockage? Because there's always a way. I'm putting it out there. If I've got friends that live in places where they haven't got their own gardens, come and use some of mine. I've got plenty of space. You can have your own vegetable patch here. Come, so I think my main message is be creative. It's very difficult for you as an individual. You think like that. So ask your friends, what do you think? I've got this problem. Can you think of a way around it for me? Because everyone will look at it from a slightly different angle, and that will be, you'll get different ideas that you hadn't even thought of yourself. So that's
Yeah, for
what
sure.
I'm doing at the moment. I'm sort of saying to people, I'm struggling here. What do you think? And then people are coming up with things that I would have really struggled to have come up with myself.
Yeah. Yeah, two heads are better than one.
Definitely.
Three heads are better than two. I think to continue off what you said, when you work on yourself, the more you work on yourself, obviously have to work through a lot of stuff. There's always things to work on, but one of the biggest results that people will get is just becoming happier, and as a result of being happier, you want to do more.
Yes.
You want to help more. Like you want to. It. They always say you got to help yourself first, and you do. You can't. For instance, you can't go in and donate a bunch of money to charity if you're struggling to make ends meet. You can't. Just as a really simple example. And what might seem selfish or self-centered on the surface is actually it's not, because you're doing something for you which you can then give to other people, and it's a big flow-on effect. Like even with consciousness, the more you raise your consciousness, the more people around you are affected by your heightened vibration. So it really isn't selfish when you think about it, because as a result of this past 2 years, I've become a lot more interested or passionate about just other people's situations.
Yeah.
So like I donated some money to the floods last week, and it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was a little bit of money, and I know everything helps, and people were, you know but it's, I wouldn't necessarily have done that in the past. Maybe I would have, maybe I didn't. I usually donate to animal charities instead, but you know it's, and I don't, I'm not trying to win any awards or anything by doing it, but that's my point though. You kind of do it quietly. You don't need to tell anybody about it. You can kind of just do it, and it'll come back to you eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such an important point that, it's like, that I know they've done loads of studies on depression and anxiety and shown that when you do feel part of a community, or you feel that you're helping someone or something else, it's hugely healing to you. And my personal experience is that is so, so true. And, it also keeps you on track. So, for example, I can't help my clients with health advice for themselves or their animals if I'm not walking the talk and doing it myself. My joke is you're not
Right.
going to go to a fat aerobics teacher. If I'm going to a fitness class,
Yeah.
I want the
Yeah.
fitness instructor to look fit, because you've got to be
Yeah.
walking the talk. And yeah, I've just seen some amazing examples of what ordinary people have been doing, and I just think it's just absolutely wonderful. I really do. And I think, this is what's changing the world. It really is, one little help at a time. And
Yeah.
you know, also just having these conversations, for me, it's like therapy. It
Mm.
makes you think through things, and you can talk through things and think about things from a different angle, and it just keeps you on track. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you too. Cool. Well,
To
shall we
anyone who's
wrap it up?
listening, yeah, we'd love to hear, you know, what little things you're doing that is making a difference to you, because people really get inspiration from other people, don't they, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's one of the beauties of the internet is that you can see somebody do something, and it is just a flow-on effect. I mean, that's why things have been set up the way they have, isn't it? That's why we are we've been brainwashed to kind of think certain ways. So everybody's kind of adopts that every man for himself mentality, which is a really terrible mentality to have.
Yeah, it is. And we're not seeing that, are we, though? So that's the good thing. I mean, as you say, the example, something good comes out of something so awful. What you're seeing in Australia with all the floods, you're seeing amazing people helping each other out. And that's just so, so important. Well, good
Mm.
luck to everyone in Australia. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again with the others next week.
Yes. Yeah.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye bye.